the Oregon Ducks head to Arbor, Michigan to take on the Michigan Wolverines. First time Ducks have head to the Big House since 2007.
Hey, what happened then?
They beat the brakes off of Michigan. That was a Michigan team that entered the year number 2 overall, and then lost to App State, and then lost to Oregon.
The wheels fell off.
Yeah, that was a rough season for Michigan. This one has been rough too. Hasn't been the season that Michigan had hoped that they were going to have, especially coming off a national championship a year ago. But when you look at it, they have played an insanely difficult schedule this year. 5-3 overall. Their losses are to Texas, Washington, and Illinois. Right? But when you play a non-conference schedule that does include Texas, that's a big in. That's a big in right there. Ducks enter this game. I think the line has been kind of fluctuating between 14.5 and 13.5. I think it's down to 13.5 right now.
Well, Michigan has a massive fan base.
They do, but that line's tight. I mean, just think of what it was last week when number 20 Illinois, which beat this Michigan team 21-7 coming into Autzen Stadium. That line opened at 25 and ended up closing at 21 and ended up getting punched in the mouth.
Looks like right now it is
-9.
minus 15 according to DraftKings.
Minus 15.
I think
big money coming in on the Ducks.
So I think the justification or reasoning behind this is not that they don't think Oregon is going to win or win comfortably. It's that how they're going to win is not going to be as explosive, I think. And I think that it has to do probably with Michigan's defense. They do have 3 day one players on that defense that will be in the NFL draft in a couple months. You've probably got the best corner in the country.
Who's been hurt, missed last game, and is questionable for this game. Actually, Dan Lanning talked about Will Johnson, who is one of the best corners in the country, and his availability and what he changes for this Michigan defense.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's a great player. He has ball production. He gets in and out of breaks. He's able to take away, a side of the field. So, he's definitely a guy that would make an impact.
If they don't have him,
it starts to fall apart real quick.
Yeah. And his injury is, I mean, they're very tight-lipped on absolutely everything and everybody.
Yeah, remember the starting quarterback situation when Alex Orji was going to start, open the season, and lo and behold, it wasn't Alex Orji.
They're giving us like hockey injury reports though, because they're like lower body.
Oh yeah,
lower leg, ankle injury maybe. But there's these conversations out of Michigan that are, is he protecting himself for his draft stock? And I hate this. Like every time somebody is injured or sitting out and the season's not going your way, they're like, oh, he's going to sit out because he wants to protect himself for the draft. They're all saying, Sharon Moore is saying, no, he's going to play. He will play again. We're just not sure if he's going to play this week. He did not play in a rivalry game last week against Michigan State, so that does tell you something about severity of it. But if he is not in there, remember when Ohio State came in, Denzel Burke was one of the top corners in the country too, and Oregon said, all right, well, we'll see. We're going to go at him. By the way, Nebraska did the exact same thing to Ohio State secondary and said, oh, we'll try to go over the top. We'll take the top off of this defense. And, they said, we trust our guys a little bit more than you trust yours. And when you have a corner that is as good as Will Johnson, people are just, you don't want to go at him because of how good he has proven on tape that he can be. But there are teams that'll say, all right,
dude for dude, we'll push you.
We'll try to see. And when you have an accurate quarterback, that's when you want to go at those guys. And Dylan Gabriel has shown some pinpoint accuracy over the last handful of weeks. Dan Lanning did talk about the big guys up front because Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, they are healthy.
Terrifying.
And they are menaces on the interior of that defensive line.
Yeah, you watch them. They're game wreckers, right? They're guys that you have to have a game plan for. But 78-55 both, they make an impact, consistently in the game. They beat, single blocks. They're certainly good against double teams. They're good against the run and the pass. So they're guys that you have to spend time and effort for. And, anytime you have guys like that up front, it makes it easier to cover in the back end.
That is going to be the big one for Oregon, right? Is the the success that we have seen with Oregon's offense, especially recently, has been predicated in the balance that they've shown, right? It is when their offensive line started to click and you have got the threat of run and pass on any given play, and whether it's the RPO game or decided run or pass calls, keeping defenses on their heels and being predictably unpredictable is the toughest thing for a defense to defend. If you can make Oregon one-handed, then all of a sudden that is where you give yourself a puncher's chance. And that may be where this line and this betting line is condensing a little bit, right? Is that if Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant can force Oregon to be one-dimensional and to throw the ball, the game will be tighter.
Yep. And that's why I was kind of going with that, is the idea of you play on the edges as opposed to, because, I mean, you can't avoid those guys, but you also kind of need to avoid those guys. Because if you try to play with them, even if you're Oregon, you're Georgia, you've got, interior, your offensive line has got guys who are going to be Sunday players. Those two dudes, again, those are day one guys. And they are, because they're so disruptive. And it doesn't matter how good you are. Eventually, they're going to make plays. And if you can limit that damage, it just makes things easier. Now, again, if you're Oregon, you can't play scared. You can't play afraid. You can't avoid them at all costs. But you don't want to give them the opportunities to be those game breakers.
Yeah, but what's crazy about this Michigan defense is they have those guys up front. And I think it is similar to Oregon a little bit in that they have not been dominant against the run.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, USC ran for 290 on them. Arkansas State ran for 3 bills on them. There's yards to be had there. And it's not like over the last handful of weeks, they have shorted up and they have been clamping down a little bit more. But Lanning talked about the importance of that run game.
Well, I mean, it's something we're preparing for, is the ability to be able to run the ball on a team like this. I think that's important when you play in games like this. They've always been a really physical run game, team. They've always done a good job of running well, and I think our offense and our team is most efficient when we have a good run game going. So that'll be an important piece for us to try to figure out.
I think there is this idea that Oregon is still a finesse team.
Yeah, and they're not.
And I think that is not that isn't true any longer. And I know that there's a lot of Michigan fans that believe that Oregon still is, a play on the edges team. And if you watch and you see, the screen game that they do implement to Tez and to Evan Stewart and getting balls out quick on the perimeter, it may look like they are, but their run game is more power-oriented than it is outside zone, inside zone, zone read like the Chip Kelly days.
Well, let them believe that, and then
you about to find out.
Yeah, but it's really weird though that there hasn't been this evolution of what Oregon is, because really Mario Cristobal is the one that kind of started the more physical power run game at Oregon. In that, it's kind of transferred over multiple offensive coordinators. That the physicality up front is where they are going to be
get big
winning
dudes
games
in
on the run
recruiting
game.
pool, increase physicality.
Well, no, it's scheme wise too. Like scheme wise, it is a lot more power run than it was before.
Do you feel like that trend is even more so true, even just across college football in general? It feels like it's gone
absolutely
less zone and more power.
Yeah, there is. Well, it's a blend of the two that you can have, because there was this the old way of thinking is you either have to be a predicated zone prominent offense in your run game, or you are a downhill hat on hat, man on man blocking scheme. And then with the proliferation of the RPO, it has gone to now we can do both of these things. We can throw RPOs and we can run power. We can run duo, and you're seeing teams do it all the time. And I think that is something that as offensive coordinators have started adding more in their hat, we see far more balance, and it's not just you're one or the other. And you see it a lot more with the elite offensive lines, and you got to have the dudes that come up that way. But you're seeing it in high school football more, and it's all trickle up.
I think it's the same adage of you're seeing bigs in the NBA shoot threes. You're now seeing offensive linemen that years before they were kind of a scheme dependent. Like, hey, this guy's more of a, hey, we're going to play on the edges. We're going to make quick feet. But now it's hard to find these guys. The Panay Sewells, as rare as they are, they're becoming more common. Where you get guys that are big and can maul you.
The mutants are taking over.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I mean. They're just, what's his name? Tate Rutledge, who's out for Georgia. He's very much the same way, just this absolute behemoth of a human. The Colts left guard from Notre Dame. God, what is his name? Absolute
Quentin Nelson.
Quentin Nelson, absolute mauler, but also. Just flip if you flip through social media and you have NFL highlights that come up, you will just see him out on the edges pulling and murdering people.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that's not supposed to happen.
Haven't seen that.
That's not supposed to get out there that fast. And so you get I think they're just the skill level of these guys that are just so big, their ability to play hat on hat versus actually playing in the zone and getting to second levels and getting to the outside. It's just allowing more, because I think in the past you either recruited for I'm going to play between the tackles or I'm going to play on the edges, just because it was hard enough to find good offensive linemen. It's significantly harder, 10 years ago to find offensive linemen that were great at both.
Well, and yeah, the skill sets were always predicated to, all right, this kid has never blocked a man concept in his life. Well,
it's just stretch and reach.
It's going to take him a really long time for us to break that out of him and teach him how to reblock. Well, now you have high schools that are saying we can do both.
Mm-hmm.
We can do both, and that changes. That really has changed the game. Is you can get certain programs to be multiple, but trickle up is never more prominent than in football. Football, everything in every other sport is something happens at the top and it all fades down.
Mm-hmm.
In football, it is you start at the bottom and it works its way up.
Because the skill level needs to increase.
It does. And as the guys learn and other coaches, you can get away with more. And to be quite honest, at the lower levels of football, you get more creativity out of smaller schools that say, all right, well, how can we find an advantage, right? I mean, there's a lot of some of the greatest football minds take stuff from the wing T offense because a coach is like, we don't have big dudes. How can we get away with it? How can we get away with having smaller linemen and winning a football game? And you see a lot of the eye candy stuff and the way that things are taught as far as, the dealer of a quarterback and play fakes and stuff like that. It comes from wing T offenses, and it trickles its way up into, college and then eventually the NFL. I'm excited for this game though at Michigan. I think one of the things that Oregon has not played in a hostile environment yet.
No, and this is their first opportunity.
It really is. I'm interested to see
Oregon
State was not, UCLA was not, Purdue was not. They get two of them.
To see how, because, Michigan fans, and I think the old school Big Ten fans got their panties in a bunch when Autzen got a bunch of love for how loud it was. And, they continued to parrot that they only have 60,000. How could it possibly be that loud? We have 100,000 at the Big House. We have 110,000 at Penn State. We have 100,000 at the Shoe. It's cool. You're also 20 yards further off the field. And again, Memorial Coliseum in LA can get 89,000 in there. But you've got the track, you've got the stadium pushed out, and it's got a traditional stadium with a slow slope.
Yeah.
Where Autzen is just, tilted in on you.
I've never been to the Big House. I'm excited.
It's on the bucket list, and I'm mildly jealous.
I heard it is very wide.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big old stadium.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it's not. Look, they were in the national championship game, but it's not the same Michigan team as last year.
Not even close.
And so it's and were it close to that, this would be a big, huge thing. And so, but I feel like it's lost a little bit of its luster.
Yeah. Yep. Two touchdowns though. From what we've seen, it wouldn't seem like it's a 2-touchdown game, especially with the way. And I think the surprising part for me is with the way Oregon's defense has played recently. It is still a 2-touchdown game, and you're playing a one-dimensional offense. We'll find out more, though, as this season and this week rolls on because Oregon is now heading to the big house. First time for Dan Lanning, too. How about that? You see that? His first time there.
Oregon started out as a 2.5-point favorite, and now it's 15. I don't know if that 2.5 was like at the beginning of the season.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the opening line over the summer
Okay,
when they
thank you.
first put out the summer lines.
Okay.
That's not this week.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't figure. Yeah, but that's a big swing. That's a big SWINJ.
Yeah, 13 points would be a doozy.